Hey guys, tonight we step into a world that's both ancient and utterly absurd. You're standing in a frozen dawn that hasn't seen sunlight in 2 weeks. The air tastes like dry iron. Your eyelashes are crisp with frost. And your nose? Yeah, it's just given up. You're not alone. Hundreds of reindeer mill around you, snorting, pawing at the snow. Occasionally, head-butting each other with the kind of enthusiasm only hooved animals can muster. This is your herd, and today, you're going to lead them across the Arctic Circle. You'll walk, you'll sled, you'll curse the ice, and whisper thanks to it in the same breath. This isn't a scenic winter hike. It's a full-body ordeal that involves 16 hours of motion, perpetual cold, and the occasional reindeer with a death wish. You'll learn to recognize different shades of white. You'll hear the crunch of snow beneath hooves in your dreams. And you'll start to think that snow might be watching you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Arctic midnight? Florida sunrise? I want to know. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots hit the snow like muffled drum beats. Each step sinking just deep enough to annoy you, but not deep enough to justify stopping. The cold here isn't just cold. It's philosophical. It questions your existence. It nibbles at your willpower. This is the Scandinavian Arctic in winter, somewhere between the 66th and 70th parallels north. You're herding semi-domesticated reindeer across Lapland, a region that spans Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia's Kola Peninsula. All political boundaries dissolve into the snow here. Only reindeer know the real routes. The morning starts at what your watch claims is 5 a.m., but that means nothing here. You haven't seen the sun since Wednesday. There's just a dim indigo glow that washes over the land for a few hours, then slips away like a tired match flame. You check your breath. It fogs up instantly, drifting sideways in the wind, and then crystallizes on your scarf. You've wrapped yourself like a human pastry in reindeer hide, wool, and synthetics. But one toe is already suspiciously numb. The reindeer are not waiting. They're restless, stamping their hooves, their thick winter coats puffed out like Viking parkas. One of them, a grumpy old male with lopsided antlers, eyes you with something approaching judgment. You murmur his name, because yes, of course they have names, and he snorts. You've known this animal longer than some cousins. He tried to gore you once over a frozen apple. As you begin the march, the silence is both peaceful and disturbing. No cars, no chatter, no humming infrastructure. Just wind, the creak of harnesses, the occasional belch from a reindeer, yes, they burp, and the crunch of snow packed by centuries of hooves. You're following a trail that's older than written history, an invisible corridor carved by instinct and repetition. The Sami people, the region's indigenous inhabitants, have used these paths for generations to guide their herds toward seasonal grazing grounds. You, meanwhile, have Google Maps offline, and it still wants to reroute you through a lake. Scientists still argue over how reindeer remember these migratory paths. Some claim it's a genetic memory passed through centuries. Others say it's subtle environmental cues, the shape of hills, wind direction, mineral content in snow. A few even speculate that reindeer can sense Earth's magnetic field, like feathered compasses in hooves. Whatever the truth is, You're definitely not the one leading this journey. They are. You're just here to keep them alive, on track, and out of trouble. Half an hour in, the first tiny disaster strikes. One of the younger calves wanders too far from the group and gets tangled in a low birch branch. You jog over, your knees already protesting, and untangle the little idiot while he bleats like he's being murdered. His mother gives you a look that says, "This is why we can't have nice things." It's easy to romanticize this life until you do it. Then you realize that stepping in reindeer dung at 20 degrees Celsius is more slapstick than scenic, that your thermos never closes quite right, that gloves become mortal enemies the moment you take them off to check your phone. Speaking of phones, it's already died. Battery went from 53% to 0 just because you looked at it too hard. Cold doesn't care about lithium-ion chemistry. Still, there's a strange beauty to the monotony. The snow reflects light in ways your eyes haven't evolved to fully process. Tiny hexagonal crystals scatter across the ice like ground-up diamonds. Occasionally, the sky tints magenta, especially when there's high-altitude ice fog. You catch yourself smiling. Then a gust of wind slaps you in the ear, and the moment ends. By mid-morning, again, meaningless word, you've covered about 5 kilometers. It feels like 50. Your sled, pulled by 2 reindeer and loaded with supplies, skids behind you with a satisfying crunch. You've got dried meat, tea, flint, spare socks, and a radio that only picks up the same folk song on every channel. One reindeer farts audibly, and you make a mental note to keep your food farther away from him tomorrow. Around you, the landscape is deceptive. What looks like a solid white crust might be a meter of powder, hiding sharp stones, or, worse, air pockets from old animal burrows. You walk carefully, balancing like a drunk ninja. Occasionally, you prod the ground with your stick before stepping. One wrong move, and you're knee-deep in snow, swearing loudly while the herd rolls its collective eyes. You spot a small rock, outcrop ahead, half buried in frost, but solid enough to mark your first checkpoint. You tie a piece of red cloth to the birch nearby. It flutters faintly. This isn't for navigation. It's for the next herder, in case the snow tries to erase the trail. Sometimes, it's the small kindnesses that hold the wilderness together. As you press forward, the sky begins to darken again, though it never really brightened. You've been awake for 7 hours, and it's not even noon. You smell something, earthy, sweet, a little smoky. That's the herd. Reindeer musk is like pine tar mixed with fermented sock, but weirdly comforting after a while. It smells like momentum. One final glance at the icy horizon. The trail dips slightly ahead, winding toward the next valley. The reindeer begin to descend without prompting, hooves sinking, nostrils flaring. You sigh, grit your teeth, and follow. If you think herding reindeer is just a scenic winter stroll with 4-legged snowflakes, think again. These animals have personalities, and not the cuddly kind. You're out here trying to keep 300 egos on hooves from staging a coup, and the social dynamics would make high school drama look tame. There's the alpha bull, always lumbering near the front, throwing shade with his antlers, and glaring at any reindeer who so much as breathes wrong in his direction. He's basically the grumpy gym teacher of the tundra. Then you've got the cliques, young bucks that stick together like a snowball gang, older cows who seem to judge your sock choices, and calves that alternate between adorable and existentially exhausting. One calf keeps veering off trail just to lick ice-covered rocks. You name him Greg. Greg has no survival instincts. Greg is going to give you gray hairs. But here's the kicker. They remember things. Not just trails and feeding spots. You too. If you ever shouted at one, bumped it with a sled pole, or didn't share your dried lichen stash last season, yeah, they've filed that under grievances. One cow, let's call her Olga, still glares at you sideways because you forgot her salt last spring. She makes sure to walk just close enough to your sled to bump it every 40 minutes. Coincidence? Please. Scientists still argue over how intelligent reindeer actually are. Some insist it's mostly instinct, finely tuned by millennia of migration and survival. Others claim reindeer can recognize individual human faces, remember specific locations across years, and even navigate simple mazes in lab tests. Your take? Anyone who's seen a reindeer deliberately step on your boot the moment you set it down knows the truth. But despite the politics, you manage to keep the herd moving forward. That's the unspoken job. Gentle manipulation. You never force them. You nudge them. You use body placement, subtle whistles, rhythmic clicking sounds, and sometimes you whisper secrets into the wind, half hoping they'll listen. A low hum, a soft chant, a nonsense rhyme about cold hooves and warm fires. They don't understand the words, but they get the rhythm. You're part of the landscape to them, a tall, funny-smelling snow creature who occasionally hands out moss. Still, things go wrong. One of the younger bulls starts eyeing the alpha. Bad sign. You spot the antler tilt, the lowered head, the weird snorting sounds. This is reindeer for square up, buddy. You move fast, inserting yourself between the two with your pole out like a referee at a Viking MMA match. The challenger flinches, grumbles, and trots away. Crisis averted. For now. Your arms ache, shoulders stiff. The pole's weight, the wind, the constant scanning, it all wears on you. But the moment you stop watching, something weird happens. Reindeer have a sixth sense for mischief. The second your back turns, they start wandering. Not far, just far enough to test you. You're basically chaperoning the weirdest school field trip of all time. By midday, still a meaningless term, thank you Arctic, you set up a quick rest point. The herd slows, clusters together, and begins to dig with their front hooves, brushing snow aside to reveal the dark patches of ground underneath. It's lichen they're after, dry, stringy, nutrient-rich. It looks like overcooked noodles, but it's essential. Without it, they don't last the winter. You watch them munch, steam rising from their backs like furry kettles. One farts, loudly. You pretend not to notice. You lean against your sled and let your brain float. The snow reflects light in all directions. It's not blinding, just diffused, like walking through a dream or a very intense laundry commercial. There are no trees out here, just stunted shrubs buried under a foot of white. The land rolls in slow humps, soft but treacherous. You can't see what's under the snow. Could be solid ground. Could be a frozen swamp. Could be an old Soviet landmine. You try not to think about it, and yet, in all this frozen absurdity, you start to feel peaceful. You are part of something cyclical, eternal. You and your misbehaving herd are just this season's travelers on a route older than asphalt, older than borders, older than names. Except Greg. Greg the calf has once again wandered off, trying to chew a frozen glove you dropped last week. You trudge over and retrieve him, muttering not so gentle encouragement He blinks at you, drool freezing to his chin. You wrap your scarf tighter and sigh. Just as you're about to move on, a few reindeer start sparring. Not a full fight, just a bit of antler clashing, a push, a grunt, and then they part. It's more of a stress release than a turf war. Still, it rattles the younger ones, and you spend the next 10 minutes coaxing them back into formation. Like kindergarten, but with hooves and less glitter. One young herder you passed last week swore by music. Claimed his reindeer calmed down if he played old Finnish disco tracks through a tiny portable speaker. You tried it once. Your herd stood still for 5 minutes. Then one of them headbutted the speaker into a creek. You never tried again. As the light starts to fade again, still not night, technically, the herd picks up speed. They sense something, perhaps the scent of better grazing or a memory of rest ahead. You don't question it. You follow. That's the lesson out here. You're not in control. You're just one more part of the movement. In the distance, a fox darts across the snow. You barely notice at first, just a flash of orange, a blur on the white. But it's enough to trigger a ripple through the herd. The younger reindeer cluster tighter, the mothers snort. You steady your pole and prepare, just in case. But the fox doesn't linger. It vanishes like a flame in the wind, leaving only paw prints behind. You exhale slowly. The herd resumes its shuffle. Your feet are soaked. Your scarf is half ice. Your fingers have achieved that special numbness where you could lose one and not notice for an hour, but you're still moving. So are they. Olga bumps your sled again as she passes. You look her in the eye. She stares back. You nod. She blinks. You both understand each other in that weird, grudging, cold morning way. The snow deepens as you descend into the next valley. Let's talk about what you're wearing. Because at this point, your body is one oversized popsicle with legs, and every layer matters. You don't dress for fashion. You dress for war, against the wind, the wet, the sweat that becomes instant ice. Your outfit is less cozy Nordic chic and more mobile survival kit with vaguely human shape. It starts with the base layer, merino wool, obviously. Synthetic fabrics are fine in theory, but once they get wet, they betray you like a cat in a canoe. Wool stays warm even when it's soaked in regret and reindeer slobber. Over that, a second layer, thicker wool. Your grandmother would weep with pride. Then comes the real armor, reindeer hide trousers, fur-lined boots with triple laces, and a coat that once belonged to someone's uncle, who claimed to have fought a polar bear with a ladle. The outer shell must be windproof, waterproof, and loud enough to scare off birds when you move. Noise is insulation. Your gloves, 2 pairs. Inner liners made of fleece, outer mittens the size of loaves of bread. You look like you're about to defuse a mine. And yes, mittens are better than gloves in cold this deep. Your fingers huddle for warmth, like penguins on a bad date. On your head, it's a wool hat under a fur-lined hood, the kind that makes you look like a medieval lampshade. A scarf wraps over half your face, leaving just enough space to breathe and occasionally collect ice stalactites on your eyebrows. Your breath condenses into tiny icicles on your lashes. You blink them off. You've stopped caring. Some herders wear traditional Sami gear, a gakti tunic with a bright belt and embroidered symbols showing family history or home region. Others go full synthetic, wrapped in neon Gore-Tex that makes them look like confused astronauts. You've got a bit of both. Old ways in one pocket, new tech in the other, and snacks in both. What you're carrying is a whole different conversation. You got a backpack stuffed with survival gear, some of which you understand, and some you keep just in case someone else does. A flare gun, rope, GPS beacon, salt blocks, a multi-tool, a knife that could butter toast or fight off a disgruntled moose. Tea thermos, of course. It's lukewarm now. It will be ice by mid-afternoon. One fringe herder you met last year swore by a collapsible sauna. Said he set it up once a week to stay spiritually aligned. You haven't gone that far, but you do carry a tiny Bluetooth speaker, mostly for emergencies, like when you need to drown out the sound of your own internal screaming. Scientists still argue about the best material for Arctic boots. Traditionalists say reindeer hide is unbeatable, warm, water-resistant, and breathable. Modern gearheads vote for insulated rubber boots with removable liners and reflective foil insoles. You, having slipped on both in an icy stream, can confirm that nothing helps when you're ankle-deep in slush and contemplating your life choices. Of course, despite all your gear, your nose is always cold. Always. No one has ever solved this. Some people tie scarves up to their eyes. Others use elaborate neoprene masks. But eventually, everyone gives up and lets their face freeze just enough to feel like it belongs to someone else. You accept this. It's part of the deal. What you don't accept is the itching. Layered wool plus sweating plus windburn equals an existential itchiness that cannot be reached through 6 layers of insulation. You dance like you're warding off invisible bees. The reindeer do not care. Olga watches you flail and snorts. Then there's the harness. You strap it on when pulling the sled yourself. Yes, sometimes the reindeer need a break too, apparently, and it sits across your chest like a very personal insult. It rubs in all the wrong places. Your shoulders ache within minutes. You will later discover mysterious bruises that look like they were left by an angry ghost with gardening gloves. But your most valuable item isn't your jacket or your sled. It's your sunglasses. Arctic light, even when dim, bounces off snow like it's auditioning for a laser show. Snow blindness is no joke. Your eyes burn, tear, and eventually refuse to function. So you wear wraparound shades like an alpine action hero. In the middle of nowhere, with no audience. Your outfit makes walking an effort. Every step is like dragging a mattress up a sand dune. But this is your mobile cocoon, your portable shelter. You feel the wind cut across your back, and instead of panic, you feel nothing. That's the goal. As you trudge along, one glove slips. You bare your hand for 5 seconds to adjust a strap. 5 seconds. Your fingers scream. You shove them back in and whisper promises you don't intend to keep. And yet, you're proud of how you've adapted. Last year, you couldn't tell the difference between snow damp and sweat damp. Now, you know by scent. You can unzip a coat without removing your mittens. You can squat, shift, and do full repairs without exposing skin. You have become a cold weather contortionist. One herder carries a satchel full of dried mushrooms, swearing they give him warmth. Another wears a belt full of charms. Tiny bells, carved antlers, bits of bone. You carry lint and old receipts. The amulets of the 21st century. A drone buzzes overhead, startling the reindeer. You look up. Some documentary crew must be filming, again. They love the pristine Arctic lifestyle, but conveniently skip the part where you fall in a hole and cry into your beard. The drone whirs off. You wave with one mittened hand, then flip it off internally. You're a walking contradiction, wrapped in ancient tradition and modern tech, listening to the wind while silently calculating how much your phone charger weighs. You know which moss is edible. You also know how to hotwire a snowmobile. You're not alone in this weird blend. The Arctic herder of today is both mystic and mechanic. You patch your sled with duct tape, then recite an old Sami poem about wind spirits. You download aurora forecasts, then sing lullabies to calves named after your favorite sitcom characters. The cold presses in again. You tighten your hood, your boots crunch forward, your sled follows. And behind you, Greg the calf, chewing on your discarded sock. You don't carry a map out here. Not a paper one, not a digital one, because the terrain laughs at lines and labels. There's no GPS trail marked reindeer route. Use in winter only. Out here, you follow something older, something that runs through the land, the animals, and somehow, now, through you. They call it the Sida Trail, or just the way. It's not drawn in ink or carved into stone. It lives in memory, in hoof prints, in subtle signs that only make sense after your third frostbitten toe and 50th mile. It winds through riverbeds, across frozen lakes, and along the windward edges of pine woods barely tall enough to qualify as trees. The reindeer know it by heart. You're still learning. You walk the trail by walking it, year after year, mistake after mistake. This morning, you're following an ancient corridor of packed snow, firm enough to hold the weight of a sled, but just soft enough to make your thighs burn. It's maybe 2 reindeer wide. Either side, powder as deep as your hip bones. You try to stay centered, but of course, Greg finds a way to veer dramatically off course. Again, you yell, not in anger, but in that weird half sing-song herder tone that sounds like a yodel underwater. Somehow, he gets the message. A few older cows shift to herd him back, rolling their eyes so hard it nearly causes an avalanche. It's still dark, but not pitch black. The Arctic twilight has that eerie, eternal quality, a kind of shadowless light that feels like the moon got bored and forgot to leave. Your headlamp bounces off crystalline frost. Everything glitters. The snow, the branches, the snot frozen to your scarf. Under your feet lies a layer of snow, crusted over with hoarfrost. It's fragile. Too much pressure, and it collapses. Too little, and you slip. This is where your body becomes a constant micro-adjustment machine. Ankles flexing, knees bracing, back subtly arched like you're in a yoga pose called Tundra Avoids Hospital. Scientists still argue how ancient people navigated this shifting white wilderness without compasses, maps, or Google Earth. Some claim they used stars, though good luck with that when cloud cover lasts 3 weeks straight. Others believe in sonic memory, that distant mountains and echo patterns served as audible markers, and others still point to animal behavior, how herders learned from birds, foxes, and of course, the reindeer themselves. What's clear is this: the routes haven't changed much. The land is the same. The passage between winter and summer pasture has stayed consistent for thousands of years, even if a modern border cuts across it. You pass a stubby wooden sign jammed into a snowbank. It's painted blue and red, almost buried under snow. It marks the Norwegian border. You didn't really notice crossing it, aside from the fact that the wind got meaner and the trees somehow more sarcastic. The reindeer, unsurprisingly, did not stop to show passports. Your sled lurches slightly to one side. You pause. A gust of wind hurls a spray of snow into your face. You lean into it, shifting your weight. The sled rights itself. You check the harness. A strap is fraying. You mark it in your mental to-do list somewhere between make tea and check on Greg's emotional development. The trail narrows. You're now approaching what old-timers call a snow throat, a funnel-shaped pass where wind speeds increase and snow drifts form deceptive cliffs. It's also a reindeer favorite because the funnel shape means deeper lichen patches just ahead. You remember that from last season, or was it a story someone told you? Out here, memory and myth get all tangled up. The snow crunches differently here, less crisp, more damp. That means underlying ice. And underneath that, maybe river. You slow your pace. The reindeer do too. It's subtle, but it's like they know. They test each step. Hooves pause. Nostrils twitch. They're listening to the snow. Yes, reindeer can hear the snow. Not in the poetic sense, literally. Their hooves pick up subtle vibrations, changes in density. They can detect when a layer of crust is too thin, or when it's sitting on water instead of soil. It's one of their many superpowers. You just try to keep up. There's a sudden sharp noise behind you, like something cracking. Not thunder, not an animal. You freeze. A branch? Ice shifting? You whirl around, heart hammering. It's just a snow slab sliding off a boulder. Nothing dangerous. But your brain's already run through 5 possible disaster scenarios. Avalanche, wolf pack, polar bear with a grudge. Maybe even that one reindeer you offended with your karaoke last spring. The trail rises slightly and levels out on a ridge that feels familiar. You've been here before. There's a tiny pine tree bent sideways by decades of wind. A cairn of stones half buried in the drift. You pause to add one more stone to the top. You don't know why. You just do. Ahead, the herd begins to veer to the right, down toward a narrow dip between 2 snow ridges. They've found the path before you have. You step aside, letting them pass, watching how they navigate it with silent assurance. You follow a few paces behind, dragging your sled like an afterthought. This is where you settle into the trance, the rhythm of steps, the sound of snow, the occasional huff or sneeze from a nearby animal. You become part of the caravan, not the leader, not the guardian, just another creature moving forward. You pass a rock face where someone's carved initials into the ice. They look recent. Maybe another herder, or maybe someone just trying to leave proof they were here before the wind erases it. You consider adding yours, but your fingers are too cold. You settle for a wink instead. The path dips again. You grip your sled rope tighter. Your legs brace. Your knees absorb the jolt. The sled bucks once, then steadies. The herd continues. You follow. The wind picks up again. The trail presses onward. The sky is doing that weird Arctic thing again, softly glowing without actually brightening. You glance up and catch it. The beginnings of green shimmer, faint as breath. The aurora, northern lights, dancing their silent, smug ballet while you trudge through ankle-deep snow, trying not to lose a boot. They're early tonight. That's either a good omen or a bad one. Nobody agrees. Some herders think the aurora calms the animals. Others say it makes them edgy, like something in the air goes electric. You keep your opinions to yourself, mostly because Greg has just tried to eat your sled rope and your attention is elsewhere. Your breath fogs out in long streams, curling into the air like ghosts. You exhale slowly, trying to match the herd's pace. The reindeer move with a strange elegance, chests puffing steam, hooves ticking rhythmically like wooden clocks. Their coats catch the faint green light above. For a moment, the whole procession feels surreal, like you're crossing not a continent, but a dream. And then the wind changes. It doesn't shift gently. It flips, like someone kicked open a freezer door on the moon. Your hood flaps violently. Your scarf tries to detach itself and go live with the wolves, and your eyelashes freeze together. Welcome to Arctic turbulence. The snow lifts in sheets, tiny stinging needles that somehow find every crevice in your clothes. You hunch your shoulders and press forward, sled groaning behind you, like it's reconsidering its life choices. This is the kind of cold that feels personal, like the wind knows your name and has issues with your ancestors. Somewhere ahead, a reindeer grunts. Another replies. The herd tightens. They feel it too, this sudden mood swing in the sky and earth. Their pace slows, ears twitching. You scan the horizon for signs of weather, terrain, or trouble. There's nothing. Just white on white, with shades of pale gray. It's like trying to read a novel written in milk. But the soundscape shifts. The snow doesn't just crunch, it squeaks. A high-pitched, rubbery sound underfoot. That's a temperature drop. When snow gets below about 20 degrees Celsius, the crystals become so dry, they squeal when compressed. It's science. It's also wildly unnerving when paired with a flickering sky and whistling wind. Scientists still argue over why auroras occasionally correlate with sudden weather shifts. Some suggest electromagnetic effects on the atmosphere. Others claim it's pure coincidence. But out here, no one cares about the reason. They just know to check their boots, tighten their ropes, and whisper a few prayers, whether to the wind, the earth, or whatever deity handles thermal underwear. Your nose burns, your cheeks are stiff, but still, you move. The cold has settled into your bones like an old roommate, quiet, unwelcome, and impossible to evict. You sip from your thermos. It's mostly ice. You chew it anyway. A few reindeer shuffle nervously. One kicks at the snow, snorting. Another lowers its head and begins to dig. That's your cue. They've found lichen again. You call a brief halt. The herd spreads slightly, pawing at the ground like low-speed bulldozers. You take the moment to adjust your harness, flex your toes, and wonder when exactly your left boot stopped working. You glance back. Your sled's rear flap is dusted in frost. One of the salt blocks has cracked, probably from the temperature swing. You make a note to replace it at the next checkpoint, assuming your fingers still function by then. You look up again. The aurora is bolder now, rippling like green silk across the firmament. It moves in waves, impossible to predict. Some nights, it coils in tight spirals. Others, it spreads like a slow explosion. Tonight, it snakes sideways in a lazy arc, brushing against purple smudges along the horizon. It's absurdly beautiful. You try not to get emotional about photons, but it's hard. Reindeer don't care. Greg sneezes and tries to lick a metal clasp, and then the snow changes again. This isn't windblown, it's falling. Light, vertical flakes. Tiny, hexagonal marvels drifting down like frozen dandruff from space. You hold out a mittened hand. The snow lands softly, dry, powdery, the kind that doesn't melt on contact. You move quickly, checking your load and guiding the herd into a more compact formation. Falling snow can muffle sound and obscure landmarks, both dangerous if you're near any rivers or ridgelines, which, naturally, you are. Your radio crackles faintly. One of the other herders is nearby, likely ahead by a few kilometers. Their voice is garbled, but you catch the word stormfront. You nod grimly. That explains the mood. This is how weather works out here. It doesn't roll in gradually. It arrives like an uninvited cousin with emotional baggage and nowhere else to go. 1 minute, it's calm. The next, you're dodging snow squalls and questioning every life decision that brought you here. You press on. The terrain is tilting again, upward this time. A shallow rise, likely leading to a plateau. You know this stretch. If you get over it before the wind worsens, you'll have shelter from the ridge on the far side. Not perfect, but better than nothing. You wave your arms gently, signaling the lead animals to push forward. They obey, mostly. Olga pauses dramatically, as if to ask whether you've earned this cooperation. You nod solemnly. She moves. You're allowed to lead. The climb is slow. Your sled tips once, dragging you slightly sideways. You grunt, dig in, and correct. Your calves scream. Your breath forms clouds. The snowflakes thicken. You reach the top, just as the wind calms for a heartbeat. Below, a wide expanse of snow-swept valley, ringed by jagged rocks and low birch brush. The herd begins to descend in a wide arc, hooves barely making sound. You follow, dragging your sled with the last of your strength. You don't speak. There's nothing to say. Just that silent understanding between a frozen sky and the creatures beneath it. The aurora fades slowly. The snow keeps falling. The herd keeps moving. You breathe. It's lunch, technically. Though out here, meals have less to do with clocks and more to do with how long your stomach can grumble before your hands freeze trying to unwrap a sandwich. You find a rock, flat enough to sit, not completely covered in snow, and only slightly radiating the energy of a cold tombstone. That'll do. You ease yourself down slowly, knees crackling like stale granola, and take off one mitten, just one. You are not repeating last month's frostbite fiasco. From the sled, you retrieve your gourmet Arctic lunch, a fist-sized hunk of bread so dense it could anchor a canoe, a slab of cheese colder than your feelings, and a thermos of tea that may or may not still be liquid. Welcome to fine dining in the -20s. You bite the bread. It fights back. The cheese squeaks. The tea, lukewarm, which means a small miracle has occurred. You take a moment to savor it. Eyes closed, steam fogging up your eyelashes, heat sliding down your throat like a forgotten bedtime story. A few reindeer wander nearby, snorting at the snow and each other. Greg the calf eyes your bread. You stare him down. He tests the boundary, nose inching closer. You throw a snowball. He dodges it like a professional athlete and trots off with what you swear is smug satisfaction. This is the pause point, the breathing space. You don't get many out here. Your muscles ache in new places every day. Your boots, once noble and pristine, are now somewhere between swamp and grave, and your scarf smells like reindeer, which, to be fair, is better than what you smell like. Somewhere behind you, a raven calls out. Not ominous, just noisy. Arctic ravens are the philosophers of this region, watching everything, judging you, stealing your snacks when possible. Scientists still argue about their intelligence. Some claim they can mimic human speech. Others insist they figured out how to lead wolves to prey so they can get scraps. You're personally convinced that at least two of them are following you for the drama. You stretch, gingerly. The cold stiffens joints like cement. Your left glove is slightly damp. You swap it with the spare pair hanging inside your coat. Always keep a dry pair close to the chest. Literally. As you chew your regrettably rigid cheese, your mind drifts. It often does. The quiet up here gets into your skull like snow in your boots. Slow, subtle, but unavoidable. You start wondering about absurd things. Why do your knees always hurt first? What would reindeer do if you tried to play jazz on a harmonica? Could you make a tiny sauna out of that tarp? And a thermos of tea? The answer, of course, is yes, but you shouldn't. You finish eating and stand, stretching until your spine makes a sound like popcorn. The herd is still relaxed, spread out across a gentle dip in the snow. A few are lying down, steaming slightly. It's weirdly peaceful. Until it isn't. A sudden yelp, high, nasal, and unmistakably annoyed, cuts through the air. One of the young bulls has wandered too close to a dominant male's personal space bubble. There's a scuffle. Snow flies. Antlers clash like branches in a windstorm. You move quickly, pole in hand, voice raised. Aye! The universal herder's command. Part yell, part question, part reprimand. The bulls pause. One huffs, the other grunts. Then they back off, tossing their heads like dramatic actors exiting a stage. You mutter a thank you to whichever Arctic deity handles reindeer brawls. You adjust the sled straps again. One's loosened, probably from when it bounced off that hidden rock an hour ago. You consider tightening the whole thing, but your fingers protest. Fine, it can wait. You tie a quick loop, muttering under your breath. While you work, you notice the snow's texture has changed again. It's finer, more crystalline, almost sandy. That usually means lower humidity and colder temperatures. Great. Just what your kneecaps needed. Less moisture. Scientists still can't agree on exactly how snow crystal shapes vary by humidity. Some insist every flake tells a story. Others say it's mostly chaos. You decide not to overthink it. You've already been talking to your tea for companionship. As the reindeer begin to move again, you resume your position at the rear of the herd. The sled squeaks. Your boots crunch. The wind picks up slightly, whispering across your ears like a tired librarian. You pass a patch of snow that looks smooth, but isn't. Your foot sinks unexpectedly. You stumble, almost fall, and just barely catch yourself on the sled. Heart thudding. That's a depth hoar patch. Loose, sugary snow, formed by temperature gradients at the base of the snowpack. Looks safe. Isn't. You mark it mentally. Maybe carve a tiny X in a nearby drift with your pole. These small cues matter. Tomorrow's weather might bury it completely. And then you, or someone else, might walk straight into a twisted ankle. You stop for a moment, watching the herd crest a low rise. The sky behind them is pale blue now, a soft contrast to the shadowed snow. It's beautiful. Brutal, yes, but beautiful. You sigh. Deep. Visible. You whisper to yourself, or maybe to the wind, or maybe to nothing at all. Keep moving. You do. Blizzards don't announce themselves politely out here. They just arrive, loud, abrasive, and deeply committed to ruining your afternoon. One moment, you're squinting at a distant hill, wondering if it's a snowdrift or a reindeer asleep on its side. The next, the sky disappears. That's what happens now. It begins with a hush, not peaceful, ominous, the kind of silence that sucks all sound from the air like a vacuum. The reindeer slow, uneasy. You glance up and see the horizon dissolve into a wall of white. Here we go, you mutter, already tightening your hood. The first gust hits like a slap from a frosty towel. Snow kicks sideways, pellets stinging your cheeks. Visibility drops from blurry postcard to cotton ball pressed against your eyeball. You're not walking anymore. You're pushing through something. The air feels heavy, mean. The sled lurches, hard. You stumble, your boots sliding on wind-packed snow. Behind you, the tail end of the herd compresses instinctively, clumping like frightened sheep with horns. You can just barely make out their dark shapes moving in clumps of confusion. You shout, short commands, basic noises, anything to signal your position. Your voice is swallowed instantly. This isn't your first storm, but that doesn't mean you're enjoying it. Somewhere to your left, a reindeer lets out a panicked bleat. Great. Someone's wandered. Blizzards like this don't just test your endurance, they mess with your mind. The lack of visual anchors, the roar of wind, the disorienting push from every side. You get turned around without realizing it. Your muscles compensate, your brain spins, and suddenly you can't tell east from up. It's called whiteout vertigo. And yes, scientists still argue whether it's purely physical or partly psychological. All you know is it's very real and very dumb. You move toward the herd center, using your pole to probe the snow ahead. The wind shrieks like a banshee with a megaphone. You feel ice form along the edges of your hood. Your eyelashes stick together. Your boots, already wet from earlier, begin to stiffen at the soles. Then, snap. Your sled rope jerks. A strap has broken loose. Your load swings sideways and tips. You swear, creatively, PG-rated, and kneel to salvage it. Your gloves barely grip. The sled's cargo, a bundle of tarps, some salt blocks, and a sealed container of dried fish, spills like a sad picnic. You work fast, fumbling everything back together while the wind tries to peel your scarf off your face. As you work, you catch movement out of the corner of your eye. It's Greg. Because of course it's Greg. He's wandered a few meters off the main group, his head low, ears back, snow clinging to his sides like decorative sugar. You sigh, loudly, then scramble toward him, boots sliding, heart pounding. You reach him and loop your arm around his neck, steering him back like a drunk uncle at a wedding. He resists, as always, then relents once he sees the other reindeer. They were never far. You just couldn't see them. You can barely see anything now. The world is a grainy, roaring blur. You know better than to try and keep moving in this. It's shelter time. You whistle, a specific pitch, long and low. Two of the lead animals turn and begin to huddle. Others follow suit. It's not perfect, but it's something. You guide the herd toward a slight depression in the snow, a shallow hollow shielded slightly by a natural rock outcrop. You unroll a tarp, anchor it between your sled and the nearest rock, and hunker underneath like a medieval hermit. No campfire tonight, no tea, just snow, steam, and the sound of reindeer breathing. You listen to them shuffle and settle, their bodies forming a living windbreak. The world beyond your makeshift lean-to is nothing now, just noise and movement. You've done all you can. Blizzards are common across the Arctic Circle, especially during spring migration when warmer air meets lingering cold. Some last an hour, some a full day. You never know until you're in it. Modern forecasts us help, sure, but they don't mean much when you're 20 kilometers from a signal tower and your phone's battery tapped out after trying to play a podcast during the climb. You sip a bit of snowmelt from a cup. It tastes like metal and regret. You try not to think about how long this will last. One reindeer, Olga, sits right next to your sled, her breath fogging up your tarp. You pretend she's doing it on purpose to annoy you. She probably is. You try to sleep, curled up like a question mark in a sleeping bag that smells vaguely of smoked fish and reindeer dander. The wind howls like it's reading from a haunted diary. You doze, wake, doze again. Time becomes elastic. At one point, you dream you're back in the city, warm, clean, sitting at a cafe with toast that doesn't fight back when bitten. Then a flurry slaps your tarp, and you're jolted back to the reality of crusty snow and a sock that might be frozen to your foot. Eventually, finally, the wind lessens. Just enough. The howling stops. The white glow dims. You unzip the tarp and peek out. The world is no longer attacking you. It's just sulking. Snow continues to fall gently, straight down now. Visibility improves to still bad, but you won't die. You stretch. Every joint protests. The herd begins to rise too, groaning and shuffling like a group of seniors after a bad nap. Reindeer, it turns out, hate blizzards as much as you do. Greg sneezes on your sled. You pack up slowly, carefully. The straps are stiff. One has snapped completely. You tie it off with a spare rope from your emergency kit. You'll fix it properly later, maybe. Probably not. The snow is deeper now, fresh powder over old tracks. You can't see where you came from. Doesn't matter. You point the herd forward into the clearing silence. The storm is behind you, but your tea is still frozen. You never think much about rivers until one tries to eat you. Crossing them in the Arctic isn't just risky, it's a trust exercise between you, the reindeer, and a whole lot of physics. And right now, your boots are sinking into what you thought was solid snow, only to feel that sharp, slushy betrayal of water lurking beneath. You yank your foot back. Too late. Cold rushes in, soaking your sock, and suddenly your toes are writing their own will. The herd continues forward, completely unbothered. Of course they are. Reindeer can swim. You, on the other hand, cannot float wearing 40 pounds of wool, rope, and shame. You back away from the soft patch, stomping the snow off your foot, wincing as the cold gnaws its way through your layers. This river is frozen, mostly. But mostly doesn't mean much when you're halfway across and a 2-ton sled threatens to punch through the ice. This is the third river today, the first one you crossed early, while the world was still crusted with overnight freeze. That was a dream. Smooth. Beautiful. You even waved dramatically like a tundra conquistador. The second was trickier. Slushy edges, a bit of a sideways slide, but manageable. This one is testing your commitment to the herding lifestyle. The river is shallow and wide, with a rippled layer of ice that looks solid but smells like regret. Snow has drifted over most of it, making it impossible to spot the weak sections. Your reindeer, clever brutes that they are, pick their way across confidently. They follow instinct, pressure testing with hooves, listening to micro cracks. Scientists still argue about how animals detect unstable ice. Some suggest they sense vibrations or temperature gradients through their feet. Others believe it's an auditory thing, like they hear the difference in snowpack. But you're convinced it's black magic. You prod the ice ahead of you with your pole. It holds. You step forward. Again, it holds. Then, a third step, and it moans. Not a crack, just a low, vibrating groan. The sound of the river asking if you really think you belong here. You shift your weight back, cursing through clenched teeth. The cold from your earlier boot dunk is setting in. If you stop for too long, it'll freeze solid. But if you rush forward, you'll end up swimming under the sled with a face full of glacial regret. There's a trick to this. Spread your weight. Use the sled like a snow anchor. You press your hands onto the edge of the sled, pushing it ahead gently, and crawl along beside it like some kind of frozen swamp lizard. It's not dignified, but it works. Halfway across, you pause, panting. The herd is watching. At least 5 reindeer have stopped to observe your technique, including Greg, who looks deeply unimpressed. Thanks, Greg. A few careful crawls later, you hit the other side. Solid ground. You roll onto your back, laughing breathlessly. The sky above is slate gray. Snow, drifting in slow spirals. You made it. Of course, now you're soaked. You strip your outer boot layer and wring out your sock. It comes out like a half-frozen slug. Lovely. You swap it with your emergency pair, the one buried in your chest pouch next to your dry gloves in irrational optimism. You hop around on one foot like a cold flamingo while the herd resumes grazing nearby, completely unfazed. You take a moment to scout the next part of the route. Another river is ahead, this one narrower but deeper. Great. Just what your left foot wanted to hear. This is where sleds really become a liability. The weight makes it harder to cross thin spots. You unhook one reindeer from the sled and lead it solo across the riverbank, testing the edges. It pauses, sniffs, and steps carefully. The ice creaks, then steadies. You follow. Behind you, the herd begins to queue up on instinct. Reindeer do this beautifully, orderly, cautious, hoof by hoof. Humans, meanwhile, need multiple poles, rope, and the kind of faith usually reserved for miracles. You cross the second river with less drama. Maybe the first one taught you humility. Maybe the sled was lighter now. Or maybe you were just too cold to be afraid. Either way, you're on the other side, and so is most of the herd. One reindeer decides to take a detour and walk along the bank instead of crossing directly. You mutter under your breath, coaxing it back with clicks and gestures. It stops, stares at you, then walks into the snow like an actor leaving the stage mid-performance. You chase it for 10 full minutes. It eventually rejoins the group because it felt like it, not because of anything you did. Back on drier terrain, you set up a short break. The herd spreads out, pawing at the ground, searching for lichen again. You sit on a rock, ice-capped, of course, and sip from your thermos. The tea has re-solidified. Again, you chew it. A raven lands nearby, eyeing your sled. You throw a piece of cheese at it. It dodges effortlessly and squawks in mockery. You're starting to suspect it's following you by name. Evening light begins to fade. Not that there was much light to begin with. The clouds deepen, and the snow turns a shade bluer. Everything is still, quiet, except for the sound of reindeer hooves and your own soggy footsteps. Greg comes over and gently nudges your knee. You look at him. He blinks. Then he tries to eat your mitten. Figures. The night isn't quiet. Not really. It has layers. A low wind humming across the snow. The soft snort of reindeer shifting in their sleep. The occasional crack as ice somewhere far off adjusts its mood. And above it all, the aurora returns. Richer now. deeper green streaks laced with purple veins, moving across the sky like silk underwater. But the herd is not relaxed. It starts with a tremor, a slight change in posture. You've been around them long enough to notice it. Heads up, ears twitching, a tightening in the group. You pause, half asleep in your sleeping bag, and listen. Then it happens. A sudden, chaotic shuffle. Hooves scraping, a thud, a panicked grunt. And then they bolt. The reindeer are moving, fast, not just wandering off, but full flight mode sprinting. Snow explodes behind them. Your sled rocks violently. Greg kicks over a thermos, rude, and Olga nearly tramples your bedroll. You're on your feet in seconds, stumbling into your boots, arms flailing for your coat. You don't panic, not outwardly, but inside, it's a symphony of profanity and dread. The worst part? You have no idea why they've run. Maybe it was a fox. Maybe a branch cracked weirdly. Maybe they just collectively decided to give you a nervous breakdown. You grab your herding pole, sling your bag, and go. It's dark, but not pitch black. The aurora gives you just enough glow to see silhouettes. Dozens of reindeer bounding over the snow in panicked arcs. You whistle. Loud. Sharp. The wind swallows it. You run anyway. The snow grabs at your legs. Your boots slip. Your lungs burn. You follow the hoof prints. Deep, chaotic patterns weaving between boulders and stunted birch trees. Somewhere up ahead, bells jingle. One of your lead animals still has their collar on. You chase the sound like it owes you money. Scientists still debate whether auroras affect animal behavior. Some herders swear reindeer become agitated under the lights, as if the sky's movement stirs something ancestral. Others say it's coincidence. Tonight, you're squarely on team something weird just happened. You finally catch up to the first cluster. Maybe 30 reindeer bunched near a frozen hillock, breathing heavily. A few pace nervously. Greg is there. Of course he is, licking snow off his own ear like none of this is his fault. You walk among them slowly, murmuring. Your voice is cracked from the cold, but familiar. Some reindeer nudge each other. Others snort and settle. It's not over. You still hear bells in the distance. You spend the next hour wrangling the rest. It's like trying to reassemble a spilled bag of marbles on a moving escalator. Some groups stopped a few hundred meters away, some farther. One reindeer made it to the edge of a ridge and is now staring majestically into the void like a misunderstood teen poet. You coax, you call, you even sing, badly, but it works. Reindeer are comforted by low tones. One herder you knew swore by humming Beatles songs. You try a little Hey Jude, someone farts. You take that as a win. Eventually, you gather them all, or so you think. You take a roll call in your head. You're not sure if you're missing one or just hallucinating. Everything looks like a reindeer when you're sleep-deprived and frost-nibbled. By now, the aurora is fading again. The green dulls to gray. The sky darkens. The cold deepens. You need to reset camp, and fast. You lead the herd back toward the original site. Your sleeping bag is partially buried. Your tarp, thankfully, didn't blow away. You repack it tightly, wedge it against your sled, and hunker down. Reindeer begin to settle, curling into the snow, with sighs that sound vaguely human. Their breath steams. Their sides rise and fall. You check their positions. Closer now. Tighter, that's good. Tired animals stay put. You curl into your bag, boots half on, jacket still zipped. Your toes are tingling in the unpleasant way. Your fingers feel like they've been dipped in glue and frozen. You can't feel your nose, and that's probably a blessing. Above, stars peek through. No storm, no more chaos, just you. 100 very judgmental reindeer, and a sky that never seems to end. You think about quitting, briefly. Fantasies of warm cafes and indoor plumbing drift through your mind. But then, you feel the deep, grounding thrum of the herd nearby, like a distant engine made of breathing, fur, and memory. You're part of something older than roads, older than maps. A tradition passed hand to hand, hoof to hoof, generation by freezing generation. You exhale and let sleep take you, one flake at a time. You wake up to a sound that shouldn't be there. A crisp, deliberate crack echoing in the distance. Your eyes snap open. The sky is a pale curtain of gray, hinting at morning, or whatever passes for it this far north. The wind is still, the herd quiet. That crack, not thunder, not ice, something else. Then it happens again, closer this time. A sharp pop, like wood splitting under pressure. You sit up, body aching in a dozen new places. Your hands instinctively go to your herding pole. Not a weapon, just reassurance. It's probably nothing. Could be a tree breaking from frost stress. Happens all the time. But out here, where sound travels farther and every shadow feels significant, it pays to stay alert. You glance around the herd. Most are still curled in their sleeping dens, steaming gently. Olga stands watchfully at the edge, head up, ears twitching. If she's worried, you're worried. Then a howl cuts through the cold. Not a loud one, not dramatic, but clear, rising, tapering. A low, drawn-out wail that tightens your stomach. Wolves. Of course it was going to be wolves. You exhale slowly, forcing your breath to come out calm. This is part of the deal. Out here, wolves are as natural as wind. They're not monsters, they're predators. They do what they do. Still, that doesn't make you want them closer. The herd begins to stir. The more experienced animals know the sound. They don't panic, but they shift, clumping tighter, forming a natural defensive cluster. Reindeer don't fight much. They run. But they also know that sticking together buys them time. And you? You buy them a little more. You stand slowly, trying to scan the tree line without looking like prey yourself. There's nothing there, just a blur of snow-frosted birch and shadow. The second howl is closer, not too close, maybe a kilometer out. Some scientists insist wolves don't often target full herds. They prefer stragglers, the injured, the young. Others say they've adapted to Arctic herding patterns, learning to read human routines. A few even claim wolves can distinguish between herder types, knowing which ones are likely to fight back. Honestly, you hope you're the too annoying to bother with type. You don't want to light a fire just yet. No fuel, no visibility. But you do whistle, a low, warbling call passed down through generations. It's not a warning. It's a signal to the reindeer. I'm here. You're not alone. Stay close. The herd shifts in response, as if reassured. You reach into your sled and pull out the flare gun. It's your last one. You've had it for over a year, half convinced you'd never use it. But tonight might be the night. You don't aim it. You just hold it. An unspoken threat to the darkness. The howls fade. No more sounds. Maybe they're moving on. Maybe they're circling. Maybe they just wanted to remind you that you're never really alone out here. You try to sleep again, curled around the flare gun like it's a teddy bear. The cold seeps in harder now. You dream of city lights and radiators, and at one point, you swear a wolf asks you for directions to Oslo. When you wake, it's quiet, truly quiet, the kind of stillness that presses into your ears. The reindeer are already up, grazing silently, their breath rising like smoke. No tracks around the camp that you didn't make. No signs of anything. But you notice the edges of the herd are tighter, the calves closer to the middle. Wolves are clever, but reindeer are not fools. You repack camp in silence. No music this morning, no humming. Just the sound of frost breaking as you fold your tarp and tug your sled back into position. You make a quick breakfast. Cheese again. Bread again. Your tea is a solid cylinder. You lick it like a popsicle, hating yourself slightly. Greg watches you with his usual look of polite disappointment. The herd starts moving without prompting. That's a good sign. They want to move, to put space between themselves and the howl. As you walk, your mind replays the night sounds, the howls, the wind, the reindeer shifting around you. It's strange how quickly your brain adjusts. Danger comes, danger goes. Life continues. You check your GPS unit. It blinks blankly at you. Battery long dead. Not that you need it. You recognize this ridge. You've crossed here before, twice in autumn, once in spring. There's a gnarled birch that grows sideways. And beyond it, a shallow valley that acts like a wind tunnel. You brace for the chill. It comes like a slap. The reindeer drop their heads, pushing forward. You follow, your boots dragging, your scarf crusted with breath ice. Still no sign of wolves, but you glance over your shoulder more often now. At midday, you find tracks, fresh, paw prints, wide and spaced, leading toward the east ridge. They didn't come closer, just passed through. You crouch to study them. Big, maybe 2 or 3 animals. One smaller, young, probably a scouting pair with a pup. You don't follow. That's not your job. You're not a hunter. You're just trying to keep moving. You stand, stretch your back, and signal to the herd. The lead reindeer turns slightly. Olga falls into step behind her. The rest follow. Snow crunches. Breath steams. And still, no sound but the herd. You press on. By afternoon, you start to hallucinate. Not full-blown visions, no ghost herds or talking trees, but your brain begins to play tricks. A boulder looks like a sleeping bear. A shadow on the snow becomes a person waving. You blink, shake your head, mutter something to yourself, and keep walking. It's just the monotony, the endless white, your feet moving on autopilot, muscles on repeat. Cold does strange things to the mind, especially when combined with sleep deprivation, hunger, and being stared at by 300 judgmental reindeer. You need a distraction, so you pull out your radio and try to make contact. Crackle, silence, more crackle. Then, finally, a voice, faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. Another herder, likely 30 or 40 kilometers west, complaining about a sled that broke in half and a reindeer named Sven, who refuses to walk unless sung to. You smile, not because it's funny, though it is, but because it's human. It reminds you that you're not the last person left alive in a world made of ice and fur. You try to respond. Your message cuts in and out. Something about wind conditions and wolf tracks. You hear laughter, the good kind. The kind that says, "Yeah, same here." You clip the radio back onto your belt and press forward, energized. The trail takes you into a low-lying valley, ringed with brittle birch trees and rimmed by frosted rocks. The ground is uneven, and the snow here hides icy dips and little creeks that whisper danger with every step. You slow your pace, scanning for anything that might snap an ankle or swallow a hoof. You come across an old wooden sign nailed to a post. Kiruna, 80 kilometers. It's half buried, the paint faded. You run a gloved hand across the lettering. You're technically still in Sweden, though the reindeer don't care. They've crossed 3 borders and several cultural zones in the past week without once asking for directions. Scientists still debate how reindeer migrations interact with human geography. Some routes pass through military zones, others over private land, some straight across national parks. Governments argue, herders shrug. The reindeer walk where they've always walked. Just ahead, you reach a long, open stretch of tundra, flat and wind-scoured, the snow like a crusted desert. This section is brutal. No trees, no shelter, no breaks. The wind comes at you sideways, whispering lies like, you left the stove on, and your sled's falling apart. It's not. Yet. Your GPS, still dead, is no help. You rely on instinct now, and rocks. A scattering of dark boulders marks the far edge of the stretch. Your goal. If you make it there, you can rest. If not, well, you'll still make it. You always do. Halfway through the plain, the wind intensifies. Your hood flaps like a parachute. Your scarf bites into your face. Every step is an argument with the elements. You yell at the sky, at the snow, at nothing. The reindeer ignore you, plodding onward with zen-like patience. Olga sneezes violently and keeps walking. You stop briefly to check your sled straps. One is fraying again. You reinforce it with a knot that's part sailor, part stubborn child. It holds. And then your GPS turns on, by itself. The screen glows weakly. You blink at it in disbelief. It tells you you're in the middle of the Baltic Sea. You chuckle, just once. Not because it's funny, but because of course it would say that. Arctic electronics are either dead or hallucinating. There is no middle ground. You shut it off and whisper sweet nothings to your backup compass, which, thankfully, still knows which way is north. Eventually, the far rocks rise like old bones from the snow. You reach them just as your right leg begins to go numb from the cold creeping up your boot. You kneel behind a large boulder, shielding yourself from the wind, and pull off the boot. Your sock is damp, your toes red. Not frostbitten. Not yet. You dry them with a spare cloth, rubbing circulation back in. The pain is sharp, stinging. It's good. It means they're still yours. As you work, you hear footsteps crunching nearby. You freeze. Not reindeer, human. You stand quickly, herding pole in hand. A figure emerges, bundled, hooded, dragging a light sled. Another herder. You relax instantly. Cold enough for you? They shout over the wind. You nod. Too cold for sarcasm. They grin and set up camp beside you. For the first time in days, you sit next to another human. You don't talk much. Just share some tea. Lukewarm. Perfect. And compare blister scars. They tell you their GPS thinks they're in Ukraine. You tell them about Greg. They laugh. The two of you rest for a while, letting the herd do the same. The reindeer mingle briefly, sniffing, exchanging what looks like gossip. Then they separate again, finding familiar companions. Before they leave, the other herder hands you something, a tiny carved pendant made of reindeer antler, a symbol for luck or warmth or just solidarity. You thank them. You don't ask what it means. You don't need to. They vanish over the next ridge, swallowed by snow and distance. You clip the pendant to your sled, tighten your hood, and move on. Let's talk about something few travel documentaries ever mention: going to the bathroom on the Arctic tundra. Because eventually, inevitably, the tea hits, the dried meat digests, and your body taps you on the shoulder like, hey, we're still mortal in here. There are no restrooms out here. No cozy gas station stalls with flickering lights and questionable soap. Just miles of frozen wilderness and the faint hope that the wind won't catch you at a compromising angle. You scout a spot, a dip behind a low snowbank, ideally shielded from both reindeer and wind. Privacy is relative when you're being watched by several hundred four-legged creatures who don't believe in modesty. The cold makes everything harder. Physically, mentally, philosophically. First rule: speed is survival. You plan your moves like a military op. Gloves off only for the absolute minimum. Layers peeled with precision. And never, never drop anything in the snow. You will not get it back. The wind waits for these moments. It knows. Just as you've halfway disrobed, it rears up like a soap opera villain and blasts across your back with a gust that makes you reconsider every life decision that brought you here. You yelp. You curse. You make a sound that might be a sob. A raven circles overhead, probably laughing. Scientists have studied cold-induced urgency, why your bladder seems to betray you faster in sub-zero temperatures. One theory: blood vessels constrict in the cold, pushing more blood to your core and triggering a faster need to go. Another theory: the universe is just cruel. Either way, it's real. Number twos are a whole different negotiation. You dig a small hole, quickly, efficiently, praying the wind doesn't undo your work. Then comes the choice. Carry biodegradable tissue and pack it out, or burn it carefully on site, with a lighter and silent hope the reindeer don't judge you. You chose the second option. And yes, your glove still smells vaguely of burnt paper. That's your burden now. And don't even think about taking off your pants fully. That's how people end up on cautionary Wikipedia pages. Instead, you master the Arctic squat, an awkward hover over a snow divot, while balancing your dignity, stability, and body temperature. Failure results in a cold butt and spiritual trauma. You remember your first trip. You'd panicked, gone behind a snowdrift, and accidentally mooned 3 confused reindeer. You've improved since then. You're faster, smarter, more tactical. You are a bathroom ninja now. Some herders carry portable toilet kits, compact, collapsible, sealed with dignity and shame. Others build elaborate snow thrones with armrests and tiny back walls. You've tried both. Nothing beats the raw thrill of doing your business under an aurora. It's humbling, freezing, and kind of majestic. There's a Sami proverb, loosely translated. It says, if your backside doesn't freeze, your ancestors are watching with pride. Probably apocryphal, but it gets you through tough moments. You trudge back to camp, feeling vaguely victorious. The reindeer don't applaud, but they should. Greg sniffs at your boots with his usual lack of boundaries. You warm your hands over a cup of tea. Your fingers tingle, half frozen, but functional. The wind has died down briefly. You take that as a sign to move again. Packing up takes only a few minutes now. The routine is second nature. Roll tarp, check straps, count calves. 1, 2, 3. Greg, still here. You push forward through light powder. The trail ahead winds between two low ridges, natural snow traps that sometimes hide soft patches beneath crusted over surfaces. You watch the reindeer carefully. They walk with caution, sensing the terrain better than you ever could. One cow veers slightly right. The others follow. You trust them. As you cross the saddle between the ridges, a sudden gust whips up snow from behind, catching in your hood. You pull it tighter, scarf up over your nose, and march on. Everything aches, but not enough to stop. Eventually, you crest a low rise and see a small cluster of standing trees, a rarity in this part of the route. Shelter. You guide the herd toward them and pause. Time for a rest. You wedge yourself between two small birches and lean back, your whole body vibrating with fatigue. The reindeer spread out calmly, some grazing, others curling into the snow. Your stomach growls. You pull out a snack from your coat pocket. Half a chocolate bar, frozen solid. You suck on it like a jawbreaker, staring up through the spindly branches at the cloud-blurred sky. Moments like this make it worth it. Not the glamour, there is none, but the rawness, the elemental simplicity, cold, hunger, motion, herd. That's it. Your radio crackles again. A voice, another herder, somewhere behind you, reporting high winds near the Norwegian border and a wandering bull that tried to chase a snowmobile. You grin. You check your map. Not digital, but hand-drawn on wax paper, folded so many times it could qualify as origami. You're nearly to the mid-staging ground, maybe a day away, maybe two. Depends on weather. Depends on the herd. You mark your position with a small scratch on a tree. Nothing grand, just a tiny notch. Your way of saying, I was here, I kept going. You stand, stretch, and gather your gear. Greg bumps your leg affectionately, or maybe accidentally. Hard to tell. You whistle, low, clear. The herd rises. The snow crunches. You walk on. Somewhere along the way, your phone dies for good. Not just battery dead, soul dead. The cold has finally wormed its way into the circuitry, past every thermal sleeve and inner pocket. You pull it out to snap a photo of a particularly smug-looking reindeer, and the screen glitches into static before fading to black. No more music. No more maps. No more desperate rechecks of the weather app that definitely lied about mild flurries 3 days ago. You sigh and tuck it away like a failed relationship. You'll mourn later. It's not just the phone. The drone you brought, optimistically, perhaps foolishly, met its fate 2 nights ago when it tried to auto-return in the middle of a snow squall and flew directly into a pine tree. It's still up there, you think, somewhere, filming frostbite. You're not mad, just tired. Tired of wires. Tired of buttons. Tired of tech pretending it knows what it's doing out here. Because the tundra doesn't care about your upload schedule, or whether your satellite beacon can ping, or if your gloves are touchscreen compatible. Spoiler, they aren't. The cold kills convenience. And vanity, you press on, surrounded by ancient instincts and Bluetooth disappointment. The herd doesn't need gadgets. They don't track steps. They don't tweet their location. They don't need 10 different apps to find their way to lichen. They just go. Still, you miss music. Even just the lo-fi playlist you'd looped for hours earlier in the trip. There's something about trudging through snow with a soundtrack that makes you feel like you're starring in your own, oddly specific indie film. Now, your only soundtrack is the snow, the squeak of boots, the crunch of hooves, the rhythmic jingle of a harness bell somewhere up front. And you know what? It's kind of beautiful. There's an absurd purity to it all. Stripped of digital nonsense, your brain starts to work differently. Not better, just quieter. You start talking to yourself more. Not full conversations, yet, but fragments, phrases, a joke half remembered from childhood, the lyrics to a song you haven't heard in years, now playing on loop inside your head like a scratched cassette. You start talking to Greg. He doesn't respond, of course, but he listens in that judgmental yet patient way only reindeer and exhausted bartenders can. You tell him about your hometown, about summers so hot you'd burn your feet on the sidewalk, about your first real snow day, about a sandwich you once had in Helsinki that made you cry a little. He blinks slowly. You take that as permission to keep rambling. You try journaling at night, but your pen freezes and your paper disintegrates from moisture. So you etch memories into the snow with a stick. It doesn't last, but maybe that's the point. Scientists still argue whether prolonged exposure to the wilderness rewires the human brain. Some say it sharpens attention, increases resilience. Others suggest it induces a mild, persistent delirium that just feels like spiritual clarity. Either way, you've stopped worrying about your Instagram algorithm. And yet, there's a weird modern itch that remains. You find yourself instinctively reaching for your phone every time something remarkable happens. A strange halo around the sun. A reindeer doing something hilarious with a snowdrift. A footprint in the ice that looks suspiciously like a giant chicken. And every time your hand hits your coat pocket, nothing. You sigh and just watch. It's harder than you'd think to just see something beautiful and let it vanish. No photo, no caption, no likes, just memory. But you're getting better at it. One morning, you crest a ridge, just as the sun decides to fake an appearance. It doesn't rise exactly. It glows, an orange bruise on the horizon, blushing across the snow. You stand there for a full minute, reindeer shuffling behind you, and just breathe. No camera, no drone, just light, ice, and lungs. You whisper, "That'll do," and keep walking. Later, you pass another herder's trail. Old sled marks half filled with fresh snow. You spot a crumpled thermal pack, likely discarded after use. A few broken zip ties. The leftovers of a repair job, maybe. Signs that someone else was here, doing the same impossible thing. You leave it untouched. Just nod to the tracks like an old friend you didn't get to meet. Back at camp, you reflect on all the messages you never sent. The text drafts about how cold your toes are. The half-typed captions about chasing Greg through a snowstorm. The meme idea involving reindeer and espresso shots. All gone now. And weirdly, you feel lighter. The herd doesn't care that you're offline. The wind doesn't know what a reel is. And the aurora hasn't updated its display since before electricity was invented. You're just here. Tired, cold, itchy, in places you don't want to discuss, but fully here. Greg sniffs your hair and tries to eat your hat. You let him. You've stopped chasing signal. You've started listening to silence. You reach a border by accident. There's no gate, no customs booth, just a small marker pole, nearly buried in snow, painted in the red, green, and yellow stripes of Finland. You pause, staring at it for a moment, mostly because it feels absurd, this tiny artifact of bureaucracy, standing alone in a sea of ice and hoof prints. You kick the base gently, dislodging a chunk of ice. The herd, unfazed, shuffles right past it. They don't recognize Finland, or Sweden, or Norway. They recognize wind, hunger, and memory. Invisible lines on maps don't interest them. You step across the border. Nothing happens. No sirens, no lasers, not even a polite moe from the woods, just the wind. It's not your first border crossing of the trip, likely your fifth. The herd migrates across 3 nations as part of its seasonal journey, a fact that delights geographers and frustrates local officials. You carry no passport for the reindeer, no stamped documents, just decades of precedent and a vague nod from international herding treaties. Scientists still argue about migratory border rights for animals. Do reindeer have a kind of transnational citizenship? Should borders bend to biology? No consensus yet. But ask any herder, and they'll tell you plainly, the animals don't care. They're just trying to get to the next patch of lichen before the snow wins. You walk onward, boots crunching softly. The terrain changes subtly, less windblown, more hilly. You spot a distant line of spruce trees, rare this far north. You know that behind them lies a sheltered plain, the last major valley before the lowlands. You've come far. This stretch is smoother, easier even. The wind softens, the snow grows lighter, the sun peeks out again, low and shy, casting long shadows behind the reindeer. You watch them stretch and breathe, steaming gently, leaving little clouds behind them like slow trains. You spot another marker, this one older, a weathered post, wrapped in faded cloth and tied with reindeer sinew. An offering, maybe, or a memorial. You touch it briefly, then move on. The herd pauses for a rest. You take the chance to patch your sled again, retying a strap with fingers that now move automatically, numb but competent. Greg lies down beside you, folding his legs like a fancy ottoman. You toss him a chunk of salt. He chews it thoughtfully, as if reviewing it for a newspaper. You check your compass. South-southeast. Exactly right. As the herd begins to move again, you fall into step. There's something rhythmic about this part of the route. The trail is more visible now, an old path carved deep by generations of hooves. You follow it like a groove in a record. Left, right, breathe. Left, right, blink. Forward, always forward. And you remember a story an old herder told you? About how their grandfather once got caught between Finnish border patrol and Norwegian customs agents while trying to lead a herd across both at the same time. Nobody spoke the same language. The reindeer walked right through the confusion, while the humans stood around arguing. Eventually, everyone just gave up and had tea. You smile at the memory, or maybe the idea of it. Hard to tell what's real anymore, after 2 weeks in snow and silence. You pass a frozen stream, its surface crackled like shattered glass. The herd steps carefully. You walk alongside them, muttering soft encouragements, words that have no meaning but feel familiar. The wind returns, briefly, a lazy gust, nudging at your scarf. You welcome it. It means you're getting closer to the outer edges of the migration zone. You stop for water, melt snow in a pot over your emergency stove. The hiss of flame feels almost alien, so loud, so modern. You drink slowly, letting the warmth work its way into your fingers. You sit on your sled, watching the herd spread across the plain. Small black and white figures against endless white. Somewhere to the north, another group is moving. You spot their trail, just faint dips in the snow, but recent. You whistle, not to the reindeer, to yourself. Just a tune, a lullaby, maybe, something without lyrics. No response, just wind and breath. As night begins to fall, again, that word is generous, you decide to set camp early. You find a stand of snow-covered rocks, arrange your tarp, and anchor it tight. The reindeer gather instinctively, forming a loose circle. Safety and routine. You eat what might be your last cheese. It's hard as granite, but you savor it anyway. You sip warm snow water. You stretch your back, which cracks like distant gunfire. You sit for a while without doing anything. No repairs, no map checking, no journaling, just sitting. And in that stillness, something settles in you. Not peace exactly, not pride, just presence. You are here, borderless, boneless, blistered, but here. The landscape softens. Not just visually, but emotionally. There's something in the way the snow curves gently now, in wide arcs across the open tundra, as if even the earth is exhaling. You're descending slowly into the lowland pastures, an area that, to the untrained eye, looks identical to everything you've crossed so far. But to you, and definitely to the reindeer, this is the beginning of the end. The air is different, less aggressive. Still cold, yes, but not combative. It smells faintly of trees again, of wet lichen, of melting edges. The reindeer pick up the pace. Greg, bless him, actually walks in a straight line for more than 15 seconds. Olga trots beside him, giving him that long, suffering glance she's perfected over the past 100 kilometers. You can see their ears perked, their eyes brighter. They know. You're close. The final stretch isn't dramatic. No big arrival moment. No confetti. Just a quiet gliding over the last ridge, where the valley opens up and the first tufts of green-gray moss poke through the snow like tiny, defiant flags. The herd fans out instinctively. No need for commands now. They dig, sniff, graze. They've made it. You stop walking and just watch. You've been following this herd for weeks, guiding them, feeding them, yelling at them, occasionally begging them to please stop eating your sock. And now, here they are, home, or at least the next seasonal chapter of it. You kneel in the snow, the motion half prayer, half cramp, and run your hand across the powder-dusted ground. Beneath your glove, you feel the rough texture of lichen and earth, real ground, not crusted frost, not hollow ice, just land. You sit. You don't even realize how tired you are until you stop. Your body goes limp, like a puppet whose strings were suddenly cut. Every muscle begins its protest simultaneously. Your knees chant. Your shoulders hiss. Even your eyelids seem to weigh more than usual. Scientists still argue about the cumulative toll of long-haul herding on the human body. Some say it improves cardiovascular health. Others point to joint damage, nerve fatigue, and the delightful phenomenon known as sledback. You offer your own opinion silently by groaning as you try to stretch. You remove your scarf fully for the first time in hours. The cold brushes your face, sharp, but not unkind. Your breath hangs in the air like a ribbon. The herd continues to graze, forming irregular clusters across the plain. The calves stay close to their mothers. The bulls do that thing where they pretend not to care, then immediately chase off anyone who grazes too close to their patch. You lean back on your sled. It's half buried in snow, straps tangled, one rope tied together with an old shoelace you found in your coat pocket. It's ugly. It's yours. It got you here. You close your eyes for just a second. You're woken by a snort. Greg is licking your glove. Again, you groan and sit up. Fine. Time to set camp one more time. The final one. You unroll your tarp slowly. More ceremony than necessity now. The wind stirs, but it feels more like a yawn than a howl. The sun, if you squint, is doing its best impression of gold, spilling a faint glow across the top of the ridge like a shy actor, peeking from behind a curtain. You boil water for tea. Properly this time. It actually steams. You cradle the cup like it holds answers. And you think about the first day, about that first deep snowbank, the blizzard, the rivers, the wolves, the border crossings, the burned glove, the broken sled strap, the cheese. It all happened, and you're still here. You sip your tea, sigh, and let your gaze drift across the herd. They look content, not relaxed exactly. Reindeer don't do relaxed, but present, grounded. They've arrived, and so have you. One of the older cows lies down and doesn't get back up, not out of exhaustion, but satisfaction. She's earned this nap. You nod respectfully. The last light of the day creeps across the snow. You dig into your coat pocket and pull out the tiny antler pendant the other herder gave you. It's warm from your body heat. You hang it from your sled's front rail. Just a little marker, a reminder. And then, quietly, everything slows down. The wind fades. The reindeer settle. The world sighs. You lie back, watching the sky change from pale gold to smoky violet. No aurora tonight. No need. The stars come out, one by one. You pull your coat tighter, your boots looser, and stretch your legs. Your knees crack like dry wood. You close your eyes. And finally, you rest. You've done enough for today. More than enough. The snow beneath you feels softer now, like it's finally stopped judging your every step. The herd is quiet. The wind has fallen silent. Even the stars seem to blink slower. And you've become part of the landscape, no longer fighting it, just resting inside it. Let your mind loosen. Let it float above the snow, drift over the backs of the sleeping reindeer, and ride the last curls of warm breath rising into the night. There's nothing left to chase, no maps to read, no sounds to interpret. Just the hush of the Arctic, folding you into itself like a thick blanket. Your fingers are warm now, or at least not cold. Your body no longer aches. It hums. It remembers the movement, the trail, the rhythm. Every muscle you strained carried you here, to this still moment beneath a low-hanging moon. If you listen closely, you'll hear it. Not words, not music, but the gentle pulse of an ancient path, echoing under your spine. You've walked a route carved by time, by hooves, by wind and ice, and now it holds you. Take one more deep breath. In through the nose, out through the frost. Let it all melt away. Every blizzard, every cracked strap, every hoof print. You're home now. Sleep easy.